blind Willie Johnson could coax music from a single string, God plucked a rib and found a woman. Concert aria in the gypsy song. Long groan of orgasm in the first kiss. Plastic bag of heroin ripening in the poppy fields. Right now, in a deep pocket of a politician's brain, a bad idea is traveling along an axon to make sure the future resembles a cobra rather than an ocarina. Still, there's hope in every cartoon bib, above which a tiny unfinished skull in its beneficence dispenses a drooling grin. The heart may be a trashy organ, but when it plucks its shiny banjo, I see blue wings in the rain.
Nothing is so beautiful as death, thinks Death. Stilled lark on the lawn, its twiggy legs drawn up. Squashed blossoms of skunks and possums on the freeway. Dog that drags itself trembling down the front porch steps and stops in a black-gummed grimace before toppling into the poppies. The ugly poppies. In Afghanistan, they are again made beautiful by a mysterious blight. Ugly are the arriving American soldiers, newly shorn and checking their email. But beautiful when face up in the road or their parts scattered like bullet or sprinkler spray or stellar remains. Lovely is the nearly expired star casting its mass into outer space. Lovelier the supernova tearing itself apart or collapsing like Lana Turner in Frank O'Hara's poem. Nothing is so beautiful as a poem, except maybe a nightingale, thinks the poet, writing about death. Sinking leafwards, lovely river in which the names are carefully entered. In this quadrant are the rivers of grief and fire, grid north. Black azimuth. Down rivers of fuck yous and orchids steer lit hearts in little boats, gamely making their way, spinning and flaming, flaming and spiraling. Always down, down, the most beautiful of the directions.
Recently, my 14-year-old sister was approached at the mall to see if she'd be interested in working at Hollister, or Abercrombie and Fitch, or American Eagle. I can't remember. She's that beautiful. And with the mall's lights all around her, I can only imagine. Yet on Facebook, one of her friends calls her a loser. More right, I hate you. I wonder if Kanye knows that these girls are experimenting. As with rum, as with skin, all the ways to touch it. My day at the mall begins with a wild cherry icy and an Auntie Anne's original pretzel. A craving. I pass women who you can tell are pregnant. And I know we all might be carrying daughters. The mall is so quiet. The outside of the Hollister looks like a tropical hut. Like the teenage girls should be sweating inside. No one's holding doors for me yet, but they will. As I take the shape of my child. And if my child has a vicious tongue, it will take shape lapping at my breast.
I want to introduce our panelists. We have Amanda Miller.
Hi.
Amanda was recruited by Egg Creative to serve as Motionpoems guest producer for season 6 this year. She was in charge of recruiting all of the Motionpoems filmmakers that you just saw, and overseeing our entire production calendar, keeping all the projects on track. Amanda is an executive producer at PSYOP in Los Angeles. She's here from LA. Many of her years of agency experience were spent at Saatchi in LA. She's worked on a range of client work and live action projects, including a documentary series called Line of Scrimmage that highlighted high school football teams during the Sunday night halftime show with Bob Costas, the popular Clash of Clans shorts. And she is currently in production on PSYOP's first original cartoon series, Grandma's Cats Are Trying to Kill Her.
It's true.
Yeah, which I like. Ayşe Altınak is sitting next to her. Ayşe, right?
Ayşe.
Ayşe.
Yeah, hi.
Ayşe is a Turkish-born director whose short films and commercials have been recognized with many honors. She got her start in advertising as a senior creative at Nike, and later as an art director on projects for Coca-Cola, Levi's, and Procter & Gamble. She has worked at Wieden & Kennedy Advertising Agency in Portland, Oregon. She now works at Biscuit Filmworks in LA. Ayşe's first short film, Hortum, was an official selection at the Cannes Film Festival Short Film Corner, and also screened at over 10 other film festivals around the world. Her second short film, The Particulars, was also screened at Cannes and won Best Drama and Best Actor at the Oregon Independent Film Festival. For Motionpoems, she developed A Day at the Mall Reminds Me of America. And Kim Adanizio is our third panelist. She's the author of 6 poetry collections, 2 novels, 2 story collections, and 2 books on writing poetry. Her poetry has been translated into Spanish, Arabic, Italian, Hungarian, and other languages. Her awards include 2 fellowships from the NEA, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and 2 pushcarts. She is an occasional presenter on the BBC radio. Her forthcoming books are a new poetry collection, Mortal Trash, from W.W. Norton and Company, and a memoir, Bukowski in a Sundress, from Viking Penguin. She is the only poet to have 2 Motionpoems in our 6th season this year. You saw 2 of them tonight. Cigar Box Banjo was in the later part of the show, and Creased Map of the Underworld with the deer lying on the floor was in the early part of the show. Please welcome our panelists. And I think what we want to do is start things off with some questions first from the audience. So primarily, I think what we want to do here is explore the process of making these films, since we have the artists here. So if you have a process-related question, please raise your hand and we'll find a mic for you. And actually, I want to start off with 2 or 3 questions, if we can, and then that'll get the ball rolling so that we'll have some things to talk about. Go ahead. Anyone with a question? Don't be shy. Yes?
Production time. How long? I realize there's not one answer.
You do need a mic because we're taping for the Walker Channel. Yes, thanks.
It's always a question about time in production, and obviously very professional productions. And I'm just curious as to how long a period, in an average way, was spent on each of the films in creating.
That's a very good question, and a question that has been a great source of anxiety for me for the last 9 months. When we started this, when I signed on with Motionpoems, I did this great calendar, and I had all these intentions about when things were going to be done, and we were going to have like check-ins, and there would be mixing schedules, and all of that went completely out the window. So I think the real answer to your question is it was really up to the filmmaker and how long they needed to finish their film. And some people, we asked everybody to do a treatment, and some people did these really beautiful, elaborate treatments, and then some people turned in like a 1-page written treatment, which was fine because I was like, you know, we have a very small stipend for this, save your resources for the production. And it, you know, it would depend. Some people would really go out and work really hard and get it all done really fast up front, like Ayşe did, and then other people would kind of stretch it out over their work schedules, and then some people totally left it to the last minute and then turned in something amazing. And being somebody that comes from a commercial background, like if something's 5 minutes late, it's like start freaking out, and that was something that I really had to let go as a producer. and let the program kind of unfold as it would, and try to help it when it needed help. So the answer is, it took as long as it took.
Let's have a few more questions. Go ahead. Sounds on.
Okay, cool. For Aisha, is that how you say it? Yeah. What did your treatment look like? And then I guess process-wise, did your conversation with the poet alter that, or what did that look like?
Well, I was really late with my application. I think it was, the deadline was gone. So I had to keep, the process really fast, and which I really liked, because I've been always, working on writing treatments. Always takes forever, and then you have to send it to client, you have to wait, and there's a long process. But I loved how fast this was, because I thought my client is the poet and the poem, so I only have to convince Amanda, you guys, and the poet. So it was, I loved that my treatment was just a one-pager, and I said I don't want to explain the poem. I just want to make a parallel story to the poem. So, because you don't want to make a say with your end product, you kind of want to, you're already listening to the poem and you're already understanding something. But I wanted to make a side story, a parallel story, so that will kind of make the whole, piece richer. So, the poem talks about. It's about this woman who is pregnant and she's worried about bringing this girl to life, or boy, or a baby. And cut to, she's talking about her worries about mentioning her sister. So I thought, great, so she can be talking about that worry as a narrative, and I can show and visualize the sister's life. So that was the pitch, quick pitch for me, just a one-pager. We said, how about we make a side story? So,
Did your conversation with the poet change your vision at all?
I didn't want it to talk to the poet, and not because it was nothing personal. I just thought the poet already said everything she wanted to say. You don't want to dissect stuff, because as an artist or a writer or a poet, it is what it is, and your goal should be take whatever you can from it. And I said, she did enough. I just want to take it and make my own interpretation. And I was excited about listening to her feedback or reaction. Yeah.
As the producer doing this for many years, it's always inspiring to me how courageous our poets are, entering into a relationship with us, just letting filmmakers do what they want to do. Kim, in your having two pieces in the season, did it feel like it took a lot of courage to do that, or did it? Where's the capability as an artist to sort of give it up and let someone interpret the way they do for us?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of knew that going in, that it was just going to be whatever the filmmaker made of it. So I didn't have a lot of attachment to what I did. I mean, I think it's really fascinating for me watching these films, because at times the imagery trumped the words, and vice versa. And sometimes they felt like they worked in tandem. And so that was it's just interesting to me to see that, because when you write the poem, you're making this verbal construct, and that's what you're, and it's sort of meant to be like this quiet thing between you and a reader. Yeah. And then when it becomes this more visible, literally visible thing, it just becomes a different entity, And so I was sort of fascinated by that. Yeah. It wasn't much to give up. It was just like, okay, do what you're going to do. And how interesting, look what you did.
Other questions in the audience?
Hi, okay. So I had a question about the recruitment. How did you go about contacting animators and filmmakers? Like, did you know them personally, or did you go to websites and things like that?
There's a couple ways. There were some people that actually I did not recruit. They already had relationships with Egg and with Motionpoems, like Alicia and Emery and Brian Matursky and Jeff Stevens. Then I had a lot of people that I reached out to from my past experience that I thought would be interested and interesting. And then there were a couple other people that came to us. So it was a mix of all of them. But if you are interested in participating in Motionpoems next year, I would be happy to talk to you after the panel.
It's worth mentioning that we only pay Motionpoems $500 for a film. So all the work that you saw, and you can remember all of the scrolling credits, all the people, really we consider these volunteer efforts because there's no way we could come close to paying these filmmakers what they're worth.
Yeah, it helps to have friends at production companies with like expensive machine rooms and flame bays and editors and stuff like that.
Other
Take you out
questions?
for a beer if you edit my thing.
How much do we pay for a poem? We pay the film. The film is payment for the poem. Motionpoems is a growing nonprofit organization, and it's a priority for us to pay all of our artists eventually. But right now, what we can do is pay a stipend to filmmakers.
I think it's also worth mentioning that people that come together and do this and make these incredible films are doing it because they love making films. I think in terms of value for filmmakers, especially the background that I come from, which is a commercial one, is that all too often we are hired as commercial artists. And so it's so refreshing and liberating to be able to do something that's your own vision. And generally filmmakers surround themselves with a community of other like-minded people. And so when you can come together and put a couple weekends into it and then produce something that's really from your heart, it's really satisfying. And that sounds super cheesy, but it's so true. And then sitting here, like watching them all together, because I haven't watched the whole program down all at once, I'm just like, oh my God, and then I remember when that film came in, and then remember when you did the music on the other one, it was so good, oh my God. So it's like, it really is one of those like genuinely satisfying experiences, even though you only get paid $500.
Yeah,
And we're at the Walker, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's never about the money anyway. It's never about the money. When you have projects like that, you just, either you do it or you don't, you know.
Yeah.
You don't negotiate or you don't, you know.
Yeah.
Other questions? We have one over here.
It is? Okay. I noted that most of the films were largely illustrative and narrative, and I'm just wondering whether that was a conscious choice and whether you think there's things that film can do in conjunction with poetry other than that.
Yeah, so every season we produce is different. I invite you to go on motionpoems.com if you haven't already and look through our archives. I would say, by and large, most of these poems, if you just looked at the poems themselves, they're lyric, not narrative. But what happens to them when you turn them into films is that film tells a narrative language. So the lyric becomes a narrative through the different medium.
And this year was really live action heavy too, because in the past you've had a lot more animated films, which can be a lot more abstract.
This year, right?
But my pool of resources tends to be more in the live action department, which can be a little bit more narrative and not literal, but you know, linear.
But Motionpoems doesn't have an aesthetic. What we do is offer the poems out in handfuls to the filmmakers and just invite the filmmakers to discover what they like. So part of it is just the luck of the draw each season, what comes through. Was there a question over here? Yeah, down here in the third row.
Thank you. That was kind of an amusement park of emotions and different human experiences through each one of those. As the producer of all of them, what effect of your paintbrush stroke was left on all of it?
Okay, so here's my favorite part that I keep telling this story, and I think these guys are tired of hearing it. But the most interesting part is that I've gotten to know a lot of these filmmakers personally, and each film is so representative of their style and their personality that it's really about them. And in terms of being a producer, and this is how Todd and Motionpoems and Egg has really set it up, is that it's the vision of the filmmaker, not of a heavy-handed producer. So it's about trying to find the best talent that you can, get people excited, provide resources when you need to or when you're able, and then, hopefully if they're doing something that's really lame, you can give them a little lift, but stay out of the way. you find good people and let them do what they do.
I have a question for Aisha. When you put your film together and created the vision for it, you had a dying boy in a wardrobe.
Mm-hmm.
You put a dying boy in a wardrobe. You remember that? And it wasn't in the poem.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know where that dying boy came from, and why you put it in.
Well, I thought after reading the poem was very short, and it kind of described an interesting aspect of America for me. I'm not American, so when I read that, I thought, wow, this this poet wants to talk about the cliches of America in a and I found that really interesting, and I thought it made it really. I wanted to add some crime, a little bit of action, some love story, some kind of, I wanted to have these little elements and kind of like put it in a really short format of communication. And I thought it will make justice to the poem, and this was my interpretation of America. Like, there was the mall, there was the crime, and there were the tacky white girls, and there was the so I thought it was really entertaining, and I didn't want to do anything really heavy or sad, but I thought even the crime felt very kind of approachable and easy in the mix, and it also, as a filmmaker, you kind of take advantage of anything. So for me, like, oh my God, this poem I can just do, I can just create whatever I want, and this was my, perspective of looking at America.
These girls end up being kind of monsters because.
Yeah, I mean, it was just you never know who's going to be where and who's who in America. It's everywhere, but I mean, that was fascinating for me. Like, you go to a store and it looks very pretty, and there's this really gentle person, and but she could be a killer. She could, she could be. I thought that really entertaining and interesting, and I kind of wanted to play with that.
Speaking of killers, so Kim Adanizio, you had over the dead body in your first piece, and then
probably more than one.
Yeah, and. I think for some reason, dead animals and girls were the theme this year, and we didn't choose that either. What were your reactions in terms of style? There were two very stylistic differences. The one with the deer was, I don't know how to characterize them, but yours, I don't know how to characterize your style as a poet either. I wouldn't necessarily put either of those films on you stylistically. Match you with those styles, would you?
But now you have.
But now we have.
So, yeah.
How does that feel?
I think I didn't know what to expect, but I think I naively expected somewhat of that. What did you say? See and say?
See say?
See say? Yeah, I think I kind of naively expected that the poem would be that the images in the poem would just be literally brought to life, And then that was obviously not the case.
No.
In Crease Map of the Otherworld, I was like, wow, all those images I thought would be so cinematic, they weren't there, But it was just this sort of other fascinating take on it that really, I thought, just sort of brought out the words and the sort of starkness of death, And then the second one had more of the images from the poem, But I had seen the first one in the meantime before I answered some interview questions about the second one, and then I felt really silly saying, oh yeah, there's going to be some great images here that a filmmaker could work with, because I realized that might be totally off the table, because who knows what they're going to do with it, So I just thought it was sort of fascinating as an interactive thing, and I think it's definitely a different animal. It's a different animal than a poetry reading. It's a different animal than encountering a poem in a book, and I don't think it's better or worse. I just think there are different, maybe, ways that you can sort of spiritually extend the world of the imagination into different areas. So I find it fascinating.
Other questions? How much time have we got? About another 7 minutes? Maybe time for 2 more questions. Right here.
Well, the actors are basically silent actors, and they're fantastic. How did they relate to being actors without words?
Well, it all comes to the casting and who you pick. And so my girls were their models, and they wanted to kind of be an actress, obviously, at some point. I mean, they were really excited about the project, but they were super young. They don't care. They just wanted to be in front of camera, but it was okay for me because I don't need always a very sophisticated brain to explain a sophisticated idea. You kind of pick your people according to your project, and I'm not saying they're silly people. They were young, and they're on their Facebook all the time. They want to be famous. They have that sort of interest in life. So sometimes I work with celebrities. Sometimes I pick normal people, or I pick people that are not actors. So with this project, we just did a casting. I wrote a casting brief, and I said I want to see girls that are this age, this type of look, almost like too pretty to approach, and in schools, pretty girls pick pretty girls. They become friends, and it's kind of that cliche. I thought it feels very legit and authentic. I had to explain them the project. I mean, it took me because they're like, so what are we doing? So what's going on? There's this kid dying, and what am I doing? So it was pretty much explaining them. So there's a poem, and there's a story, and there's a side story, and you do your talk, and you kind of gently invite them to the process. And they did a great job, I thought.
The dying boy did a phenomenal job.
Yes. He was a great kid, but that was that much. If I had a different story, I would have given him more role, but I needed him to be dead. So. Yeah.
One last question, right here. Use the mic so we can hear you on the recording.
How did you get the kids to cry? Just on the random note of
which kid?
Like the children. How did you get them to cry so well and stuff?
You mean the one in the one in Mexico?
Yes.
He totally fell down and cut his lip. If you watch it again, he's got a bloody lip. He's like, no! I'm like, this is great. This is great.
I want to thank you all for staying for the panel discussion. Let's thank our artists. Congratulations to all.
Thank you. Yay.